This is the story of a lonely rancher who shut his heart to the world, until a wounded girl stumbled onto his land and whispered the one name he thought he'd never hear again. Comment where you are watching from. Join our Western family, and let's ride into the story. The double-barreled shotgun felt heavy and cold against William Wallace's thigh, as he stood rigid in the gloom. Outside, through the fractured pane of the parlor window, he watched the trespassers stumble across the boundary of his barren claim. A young woman in a dust-caked crimson dress, the color catching the last desperate rays of the sun like a beacon of trouble. She shouldn't be here. No soul had willingly visited the Wallace homestead since Ilara's funeral 2 summers past. The folks in Dusty Gulch muttered that sorrow had rotted his senses, that he guarded his solitude fiercely and kept his wife's memory like a brittle sacred bone. Let them talk. The empty horizon suited him just fine. But this girl, her movements were too calculated, too deliberate, like a predator tracking quarry or worse, a fugitive evading a hunter. Her worn boots found every quiet patch of dirt on his porch, avoiding the protesting groan of loose planks that would betray her presence to any vigilant ear. It was a silence born of desperation and long practice. William shifted his weight, and the aged floorboards cried out a warning. The woman froze mid-step, her left hand flat on his front door, the other clamping a small, gleaming object tight against her breast. Even through the grimy glass, he could see the tremor in her shoulders, not from the chill but from an exhaustion that seemed to drag on her spirit. "Stop right there," he commanded, his voice a rasp, unaccustomed to speech after months of silence. The woman's head snapped toward his voice. Moonlight washed over her face, young, perhaps 20 years, but her eyes were haunted hollows, holding the weary knowledge of a lifetime. A dark smear tracked across her cheek, and her dress hung in rags that spoke of a brutal flight through brush and broken land. She should have fled, vanished back into the shadows like a startled jackrabbit. Instead, she pressed her palm harder against the timber and spoke in a voice barely a breath, words that struck him with the force of a sudden blow. "William," she said, and it was Ilara's voice, Ilara's precise lilt, the gentle way she used to call his name when the desert winds howled, and she needed his reassurance. The shotgun dipped in his grasp. His deceased wife's name hung in the stagnant air between them, impossible and undeniable. The girl's lips moved again, forming words he couldn't discern through the thick glass. He didn't need to. He knew that mouth, the shape of it forming his name. 2 years gone, and Ilara was standing on his threshold. William staggered back from the window, the shotgun clattering onto the floorboards. His hands flew to his temples, a desperate effort to silence the impossible sound. The woman, Ilara, whoever she was, tapped the door again, a soft, patient rhythm. "I know you're in there," came that familiar cadence, slightly muffled but unmistakable. "Please, I know you hear me." He had conjured this moment 1,000 times in his dark dreams, Ilara returning, vibrant and whole, laughing at his relieved tears. But dreams didn't carry the stench of burnt powder and fear. William forced his mind past the frantic pounding in his ribs. The girl knew his name. She possessed Ilara's voice, but she was flesh and blood. He could see the vapor of her breath in the cold air. Someone had sent her, someone who knew about Ilara, about the intimate way she spoke his name. Perhaps it was Sheriff Boone from Dusty Gulch, who'd been probing his isolation for months, wondering if a man so consumed by loss was a danger to the community. Or maybe Dr. Quinn, the settlement physician who kept urging him to seek solace in religion. "I can prove it's me," the woman pleaded, her voice breaking with fatigue. "The silver star you carry, the one you said was for luck, you never let me touch it." William's hand moved instinctively to his belt, where the tarnished Texas Ranger star he'd worn since his service lay hidden beneath his coat. He'd never shown it to anyone except, and the day before I left, she continued, gaining a fragile strength, "I told you about the debt. The land papers. I was going to give them to you at supper, but the fever took hold too fast." The information was a volley of gunfire. Ilara had died suddenly in her sleep, the physician had said, a fever that claimed her while William lay beside her, oblivious. She had never spoken of papers or a debt. She hadn't had the chance. Unless she had tried, and he had been too lost in his own exhaustion to hear. William approached the door on trembling legs. Through the dust-streaked glass he saw her silhouette, small and resolute. If this was Alara somehow miraculously returned, she was in peril and needed him. If it was a cruel trick, someone exploiting his grief, he would have his answers. Beyond the woman at the edge of his property line, William detected movement in the shadows. Horses, maybe 3 or 4, standing just beyond the grove of willows waiting. The first shot annihilated his kitchen window. William dove sideways as glass shards showered down, hauling the girl, Alara, through the splintered door frame and onto the floor. She landed against his chest, solid and warm and shaking, her dark hair smelling of pine needles and terror. "They pursued me," she gasped against his shoulder. "I'm sorry, I had nowhere else to run." Another round punched through the wall above them, raining dust and splinters. William rolled, shielding her body with his, and seized the shotgun. Outside he heard the dull impact of heavy boots and men's voices, issuing sharp commands in the deepening twilight. "How many?" he whispered. 4, she clutched his arm with desperate strength. "Perhaps 5. They've been on my trail since yesterday." "Who are they?" Her face, because it was her, the confirmation hitting him with sickening certainty. Every cherished contour exactly as he remembered, was etched with a complex blend of fear and deep-seated shame. "The Vance outfit," she admitted. "I took something from them." She pressed the small gleaming object she'd been clutching into his palm, a silver-plated flask surprisingly heavy. "They emptied the reserve funds from the Twin Forks Bank," she whispered. "Killed 3 guards in the process. I couldn't allow them to get away with it." William stared at her, a bitter realization drenching him. This wasn't his Alara. His wife had been reserved, afraid of confrontation. This girl had stolen from notorious murderers, and delivered them straight to his door. But she had Alara's face, Alara's voice, Alara's way of looking at him as though he were the only stable point in a world gone mad. A thunderclap split the sky, and rain began to hammer the roof and pour through the shattered window. William could see the brief, angry flash of muzzle fire in the dark. Hear the Vance boys roaring over the storm's fury. "Burn him out," someone yelled. "Light the whole damn place." "No," came another voice, colder, harsher. "The girl first, then we watch the widower cook." William met her eyes. Whether she was spirit, stranger or miracle, she was here, and he would not let her fall. He had failed to save his wife once, he wouldn't fail again. "The root cellar," he stated, pulling her to her feet. "There's a drain tunnel. It comes out by the creek." But as they stumbled toward the kitchen, flames began to bloom at the window frames, and the sound of cracking wood announced that the Vance outfit was not inclined to wait for dawn. In the damp, musty darkness of the root cellar, William lit a worn beeswax candle. He watched the light flicker across the woman's face. She was perched on an overturned flour sack, pressing a torn strip of crimson fabric against the gash on her cheek. For one heartbreaking second, she looked precisely like his wife had on the morning after their first long journey together. Exhausted, fragile, and achingly lovely. "I'm not her," the woman said quietly, recognizing the look in his eyes. "I know what you're seeing, but I'm not your wife." William nodded, his throat too constricted for a reply. Above them, heavy boots tramped across his floor. He could hear the sound of things being violently thrown aside. The Vance gang was searching, thorough and intent. "My name is Cora Jennings," she continued. I am Alara's stepsister." The words hit him like a physical blow. Alara had once mentioned a stepsister. Years ago. A wild, restless girl who had run off into the territories as a teenager. Alara had wept the night she told him, mourning a connection she assumed was lost forever. "She wrote about you," Cora whispered, "in the letters I never returned. Because I was too proud, too consumed by my bitterness at the world to forgive her for settling while I roamed." She produced a small silver object from her pocket, a miniature circular silver locket scratched and dark with age. William knew it instantly. He'd given it to Alara on their anniversary. "I came back for her," Cora said, opening the locket to reveal a tiny faded image of Alara's smiling face. 3 years too late to say goodbye. The townsfolk told me she'd died of the fever. that her husband had gone half mad with his sorrow. I wanted to visit her claim, to leave this with her. Her thumb traced the locket's edge, and William saw tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on her cheeks. But the Vance gang hit Twin Forks the day I arrived, she continued, her voice hardening. They murdered a family with 2 small children, William. 2 innocents who won't see another spring, because of men who take what they want and leave behind a wake of death. She looked up at him, and he saw Alara's familiar unwavering resolve in her eyes. The same fierce protectiveness his wife had shown toward abandoned animals, toward anything weak or broken. I couldn't let them keep that silver, she asserted. Not when it belonged to people like you, like the family Alara always hoped to build. Above them, the footsteps began to fade. William checked his pocket watch. They had been in the cellar for almost an hour. The tunnel, he stated, lifting the rug over a section of floor. Now. They crawled through the cramped earthen passage. Wet soil, fear. When they emerged cold and muddy, the Wallace homestead was a roaring inferno, a red stain against the black sky. From the willows William saw them, 4 figures circling the flames. The Vance gang. That's him, Cora whispered, pointing. Bart Vance. The oldest killed the guards. William nodded, sighting his shotgun. 4 against 1, a steep price for justice. Stay here, he instructed Cora. Don't move. No, she insisted, gripping his arm. If you go, I go. We fight. For Alara. He saw his wife's fierce tenacity in her eyes. Fine, he agreed. Shadows. Only fire if they get too close. The first 2 Vance brothers fell fast. Surprised. The shotgun roared, magnified by the night. The 2 remaining outlaws dove behind a water trough, firing wildly. Stay dead, widower, Bart Vance screamed. You bought your hole in the ground. I am not dead, William roared back, reloading. The silver goes back to Twin Forks. The standoff lasted 20 agonizing minutes. William and Cora moved as one, a ballet of fire and shadow. Finally, a muffled curse, a pistol skittering. Bart Vance's younger brother, barely a boy, emerged, hands shaking, begging for life. Cora hesitated. William held his rifle steady but didn't fire. Alara's letters about his decency came back to her. He wouldn't harm a beaten foe. Sheriff Boone and his deputies arrived 4 hours later. Drawn by distant gunfire, they found William and Cora sitting on the burned porch. The bank silver stacked between them. 4 bodies in canvas. 1 terrified young outlaw tied to a fence post, sobbing. Cora Jennings, she told the sheriff. Alara Wallace's stepsister. Boone noticed the resemblance. William's protective stare. The bounty is yours, the sheriff said. The Vance outfit's been a plague. Cora shook her head. Give it to the families in Twin Forks. They need it more. That afternoon William led her to Alara's grave. A flat stone under the sycamore. Cora knelt, placing the silver locket on the earth, whispering words only for Alara. When she stood, she looked like Alara in the twilight. But the smile was her own. I will stay through winter, she offered. Help rebuild the claim, tend Alara's memory. She wouldn't want us alone. William nodded, throat tight, grief, relief, and a budding hope. Years later, Cora became the schoolmistress in Dusty Gulch. William learned to laugh again. People talked about the night the homestead burned but didn't fall. A dead woman's sister brought justice and peace to a lonely man. But William knew the simpler truth. The departed send what's needed most. Not themselves, but the strength to keep living without them. That was enough.